Hello, today I will tell you about a case that happened in South Korea. A mother and daughter were murdered at home. The husband had a clear alibi. However, the case still has many controversies about the time of death of the victim. This is called the Korean version of the Simpson case, or also known as the case of the two Korean dentist mother and daughter. The story takes place in Seoul, in the Han River Basin in northwestern South Korea. At the northwestern end of Seoul is Eunpyeonggu District. This is the main transportation hub in the northwest of the capital, connecting Seoul, Goyang, and Paju. The main character of the story is named Choi Soo-hee, 31 years old and a professional dentist. Her husband is Lee Do-hang, 33 years old and a surgeon. They got married in 1989. After marriage, they opened a dental clinic together. Choi Soo-hee then started working at the family dental clinic. Because the clinic operated well, the family did not have to worry about food and clothing. They had a full and prosperous life. In 1993, the couple welcomed a daughter and named her Lee Hwa-young. A family of three lived in apartment 708 on the 7th floor of a building in Bolgwang-dong, Seoul. Let's take a look at the map of the apartment. This is the entrance. After the entrance is a waiting hall. To the left of the walkway is the utility room, then the kitchen. Next to the kitchen is the living room. To the right of the hallway is the second bedroom, usually unoccupied. Here is the bathroom and shower. Next to it is the master bedroom. In the evening, the couple and their daughter would sleep in this room. By 1995, they had been married for 6 years, and their daughter was 2 years old. At that time, the husband was borrowing capital to build a private plastic surgery hospital and was preparing to open it. The life and career of their family could be described as promising with a bright future ahead. However, an unexpected and unfortunate tragedy suddenly descended on their family. Next, we will go back in time to June 12, 1995. On June 12, 1995, it was Monday. White smoke suddenly appeared from an apartment building in Bolgwang-dong. The building's security guard immediately ran up to check. They discovered smoke coming from apartment 708 on the 7th floor. After the security guard arrived at the door, quickly knocked, but no one answered, and the door was locked from the inside. Inside the apartment, it looked like there was a fire. Seeing the emergency situation, the security guard immediately called the fire department. 10 minutes after receiving the fire report, firefighters arrived at the scene. When they entered apartment 708, they saw flames burning fiercely in the master bedroom. The middle part of the wardrobe in the master bedroom had burned. The clothes inside were burned black. The bedding next to the wardrobe was also burned. The wallpaper in the bedroom was also burned and peeling off. The firefighters immediately extinguished and contained the fire successfully. Then they continued to check other parts of the house to see if there were any other dangers. Firefighter went into the bathroom to check the situation. At that time, he was horrified to discover a bathtub full of water with a woman and a little girl inside, both dead. Witnessing this tragic scene, the rescue team immediately contacted the police. After receiving the report, police quickly sent people to the scene. When the alarm sounded, many police officers arrived at the scene, cordoned off the entire area, and began the investigation. The woman who died in the bathroom was Choi Soo-hee, 31 years old. The other was her 2-year-old daughter. Choi Soo-hee was lying face down in a bathtub full of water. The upper body was not wearing clothes, only underwear on the lower body, but it had been pulled down to the knees. She had minor scratches on her neck and arms. There were clear strangulation marks on her neck. She was wearing contact lenses in her eyes. The daughter was lying on her back in the bathtub. The upper body was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, and the lower body was wearing a diaper. The girl also had clear signs of strangulation on her neck. Other parts had no obvious injuries. Forensic examination showed that Choi Soo-hee was not sexually assaulted. Cause of death for both was suffocation. This was clearly a murder case. Police conducted a comprehensive investigation at the crime scene. They found some unwashed utensils in the sink, a baby bottle on the dining table, and Choi Soo-hee's glasses on the dressing table. Her wallet was found in the master bedroom containing 518,000 won, about $384. Front door was locked. The entrance door and windows were not damaged. The scene had no signs of breaking and entering, nor traces of a fight in apartment 708. Besides the fingerprints of the family of 3, no other fingerprints were found, and no other murder weapons were found. From the outside of the building, there were 2 ways that could lead to the scene in apartment 708. First way was to go through the security room. Police also asked the security guard on duty that day, and he said that no strangers had entered or left the building. The second way was to go along the emergency exit on the right side of the first floor of the building. But that path had been blocked by a metal mesh, and the door was locked tight. Outsiders could not enter or exit from the inside. While the police were investigating, Choi Soo-hee's husband also returned home. After learning that his wife and daughter had been murdered, he was very distraught. After calming down, the police asked about his whereabouts that day. He said, "Today is the official opening day of my private hospital. After breakfast at 7 a.m., I went to the hospital alone. The 2 mothers and daughters also ate breakfast with me. When I left, everything was still fine. I arrived at the hospital at 8 a.m. and attended the opening ceremony. There were many people there, and they can all testify." Let's take a look at the map of the area. This is the location of the apartment, and this is the location of the hospital. It would take about 1 hour to travel between the 2 locations. According to the testimony of the apartment security guard, he confirmed that he saw Lee Do-hang leave the apartment at 7 a.m. That completely matched the husband's testimony. At the crime scene, no cash or other valuables were missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. Police speculated that the 2 victims had died in the master bedroom. After committing the crime, killer deliberately stripped Choi Soo-hee's clothes to create a fake scene like a rape and murder case. Then the killer dragged the 2 mothers and daughters into the bathtub in the bathroom, then burned things in the master bedroom to destroy evidence. After leaving, killer also closed the door to delay discovery. Assessment from the scene showed that this must be a murder due to personal grudges. Police believe that the killer may have had a close relationship with Choi Soo-hee's 2 mothers and daughters. As long as there was a clue about the killer's identity, it could be easily identified, so he used arson to destroy the evidence. Then the police began to investigate the victim Choi Soo-hee's personal relationships. One of her colleagues said that Choi Soo-hee had an affair with a man. That person seemed to be an interior designer. The police then approached Choi Soo-hee's lover. However, he had not been to the apartment during the time of the crime and had a solid alibi, so temporarily he was ruled out as a suspect by the police. But for some unknown reason, he later left South Korea, and his whereabouts have been unknown since then. The police then found a diary of Choi's with the words, "I thought of him while my husband and I were sleeping together." He must have been referring to her interior designer lover. Based on these clues, the police suspected that Choi Soo-hee's husband may have known about his wife's affair. So in anger, he had killed both mother and daughter. In fact, Lee Do-hang had a very clear motive for the crime. Whether he actually committed it or not, we need to find out more about the specific time of death of the 2 victims. Forensic doctors conducted autopsies at 11:30 a.m. on the day of the incident. The bodies of the 2 victims had developed lividity spots. I'll briefly explain this part for you to easily understand. After the body loses life, those spots will appear due to blood stopping circulation. Blood in the cardiovascular system lacks energy and accumulates along the vascular network in the lower part of the body. Blood vessels in the upper part of the body are empty, while blood vessels in the lower part of the body are congested. For example, if there are many spots on the body, on the back of the thighs and calves, it can be assumed that the person was in a sitting position for a long time after death. If the spots are evenly distributed on the back and buttocks, the person may have lain down after death. Formation and development period of lividity spots is divided into 3 stages: accumulation stage, reduction period of diffusion stage, and infiltration stage. The accumulation time usually occurs 2 to 4 hours after death. but can also occur half an hour or 6 to 8 hours after death. If you use your finger to press on the spots on the body during the blood accumulation time, capillary blood in the pressed area will flow to the surrounding area. Those spots will temporarily disappear, but after releasing the finger, pressure will decrease. Blood will flow back to its original position, and those spots will reappear. The diffusion time usually occurs 12 hours after death, but depending on the constitution, if it progresses quickly, it may only last 8 to 10 hours. At this stage, using your finger to press on the spots on the body, they will open slightly. After moving the position, the original spots will not easily disappear. New spots will also not easily form. Normally, the spots on the body will be formed and repeated within 4 to 12 hours after death. The spots will be partially fixed in the lower new part of the body and form new spots. Starting from the diffusion stage, the liquid due to self-staining hemoglobin will penetrate into the tissues of the body. On the second day after death, the above phenomenon becomes clearer. That liquid not only penetrates into the gaps of the tissue, but also penetrates into the tissue cells, creating color for the tissues, called post-mortem lividity. When Choi Soo-hee was found, she was lying face down in the bathtub with many spots on the front, including scratches on the right thigh. If such a situation occurs, the time of death must be 6 to 8 hours before the autopsy. Based on the post-mortem lividity, it is estimated that the victim died in the early morning of the day of the incident, that is, from about 3:30 to 5:30 a.m. After a period of time when a human body dies, the muscles gradually become stiffer, contract slightly, and the various joints are fixed. For example, the mouth cannot be opened, arms and legs cannot be bent, etc. That usually appears within 3 to 4 hours after death, lasting mostly from head to wrists and feet. Then it will begin to subside from 24 hours to 48 hours after death, and the body gradually becomes softer. Choi Soo-hee's finger joints were stiff. Based on the degree of rigor mortis, it is estimated that the victim's time of death must be 6 to 12 hours before. That is, from 11:30 p.m. on June 11th to 5:30 a.m. on June 12th. Through the autopsy, the forensic doctor discovered that there was about 480 grams of residue left in her stomach, including seaweed soup, rice grains, cabbage, etc., eaten the night before. Depending on the degree of digestion of the substances in the stomach, the time of death of the victim would be from 11:30 p.m. to 4 a.m. the next day. Based on the 3 autopsy indicators above, the forensic examination believes that the time of Choi's death was before 7 a.m. on the day of the incident. At that time, her husband was still at home and had plenty of time to commit the crime. The police immediately brought the husband to the police station for questioning. He said he had no idea his wife was having an affair. A month before the incident, he had also met the interior designer, his wife's lover. At that time, he only thought that person was a normal friend of his wife, but he didn't pay much attention. The police also checked the husband's personal belongings and found a piece of paper in his sweatpants pocket with the names of some movies and the names of some movie and video rental store. One of the movies was called Single White Female. This is an American psychological thriller film released in 1992. The film tells the story of a woman who killed a man and put him in a bathtub. That detail is very similar to what happened in the case. The husband said he had never seen that movie, so he didn't know what was in it. Then the police went to the video rental store written on the piece of paper. According to the video rental records provided by the owner, it was discovered that the husband had rented the film on February 28, 1994, more than a year before the incident, and the film was returned after 5 days of rental. Police also discovered that he frequently rented videos to watch, so they investigated nearby stores. Indeed, they had a new discovery. 8 months after Lee Do-hang first rented Single White Female, he rented another film from another store, and this time it took him a long time to return it. The police suspected that he had rented those film clips to study the crime methods in them. Although Lee Do-hang insisted that he had never seen that movie, the truth could be completely opposite. He not only watched it, but watched it many times. Police immediately opened an investigation into Lee Do-hang's personal relationships. Surprisingly, he and his mother-in-law had many conflicts, and their relationship was very bad. Lee Do-hang was an introvert and never fought back after being insulted. The police believed that he may have suppressed his anger and plotted against his wife. On his right arm were found 3 crescent-shaped marks. The police speculated that night Lee Do-hang had strangled Choi Soo-hee from behind. When resisting, she grabbed his right arm. Therefore, 3 fingernail marks were left on it. Lee Do-hang firmly denied the accusations. He admitted that he had a bad relationship with his mother-in-law and had argued many times. The problem was not serious. 2 weeks before the incident, his family had gone on vacation to Guam. This is an island located in the Western Pacific and is an unincorporated organized territory of the United States. Continuing with the case, Lee Do-hang explained that the marks on his right arm appeared after his wife and daughter died. After arriving home, the police prevented him from entering the house to protect the scene. At that time, he was so emotional that he kept hitting the wall with his hand and grabbing his right arm tightly with his left hand. That's why there were fingernail marks on his arm. Police asked Lee Do-hang what he had eaten for breakfast on the day of the incident. He replied, bean sprout soup. However, forensics did not find any bean sprout soup in the stomach of the victim, Choi Soo-hee. To prove his innocence, Lee Do-hang voluntarily participated in a lie detector test, and the police naturally agreed to his request. But psychological experts concluded that Lee Do-hang had not passed the lie detector test. 4 days after the incident, on June 16, 1995, police returned to the crime scene to investigate in hopes of finding more clues. At the scene, there was a curtain on the balcony that had fallen to the ground. Next to it was a curtain control cord consisting of 5 sections, with less than 20 centimeters between each section. The police sent the cord to the laboratory for testing and discovered that there were cuts and burns at the end of the cord. In addition, on the kitchen shelf there was a row of dishes that had been washed clean. They were informed that Choi Soo-hee usually put dishes used during the day in the sink and washed them in the evening. On the stove, they found 2 milk bottles, one empty and the other more than half full. Choi Soo-hee's mother said that she had taken care of her granddaughter during the period when the baby was just born, so she had to prepare 2 bottles of milk every night and feed the baby half a bottle each time in 4 feeds. Then her granddaughter went home and still maintained that habit. 8 months after the incident, in February 1996, the case was officially brought to trial. Prosecutor provided autopsy reports of the 2 victims and concluded that the time of death was before 7 a.m. During that time, the husband was still at home. At the same time, he also failed the lie detector test. After a period of trial, the case came to an end. The court declared the defendant Lee Do-hang guilty of intentional murder and sentenced him to death. After the sentence was pronounced, he refused to admit guilt and appealed to the court. 1 year after the incident, in September 1996, the second trial was held. The prosecutor kept presenting similar evidence. Proving the husband, Lee Do-hang, innocent was very simple. They just needed to prove that the time of death of the 2 victims was after 7 a.m. that day, because the husband had already left at 7 a.m. Lee Do-hang's defense lawyer was named Kim Hyun-tae. He was a good lawyer with a lot of experience. At the request of lawyer Kim, court invited an additional Swiss forensic expert named Thomas Krompatzer to refute the arguments of the Korean prosecution's forensics. Prosecution's forensic agency determined the time of death of the victim to be 6 to 8 hours before the autopsy, based on the post-mortem lividity on the right thigh of the victim. But apart from that part, no other marks were found on the victim's body. Expert Thomas reminded the court that when the police arrived at the scene and found Choi Soo-hee, she was not wearing underwear on her lower body and her pants had been pulled down to her knees. The elastic band on the underwear had come off, perhaps due to some pressure causing the pants to slip down. Defense lawyer Kim then asked the prosecution's forensic expert if there were any wounds on the victim's face during the autopsy. Prosecution's forensics responded that there were. Notably, the prosecution's forensic expert was not the forensic doctor responsible for the victim Choi's autopsy. Regarding such an answer, the lawyer argued that what he saw were only photographed images. How did he know exactly about that? This question made the prosecution's forensic expert silent, because he had not participated in the autopsy and had not been to the scene to investigate on site. Therefore, the testimony of the prosecution side was doubted. Regarding the corpse, expert Thomas believed that the time of onset of rigor mortis after death is different. Predicting the time of death through the body will cause errors. Choi Soo-hee and her daughter were soaked in water after being murdered. In fact, the water temperature will also seriously affect the formation of the corpse. The higher the water temperature, the faster the appearance of lividity spot. Prosecution's medical examiner had never considered the effect of water temperature on the stiffness of the corpse when they performed the autopsy. Choi Soo-hee had breakfast at 7 a.m. that day. She may have drunk seaweed soup, and the reason why bean sprouts were not found in her stomach could be that she hadn't eaten that dish. Lawyer Kim believed that the initial autopsy report was inaccurate. Time of Choi's death was not before 7 a.m., but from 8 a.m. to 8:40 a.m. Her mother also said that Choi Soo-hee was nearsighted. My daughter had a pair of regular glasses and a pair of contact lenses. During the day at work, she would wear contact lenses, but at night when resting, she would take them off and only wear regular glasses. The autopsy results showed that Choi was wearing contact lenses when she died, so the time she was murdered must have been during the day. On the day of the incident, the building security guard discovered the fire at 9:10 a.m., and he called the fire department. Based on the intensity of the fire at the time of extinguishing and the time when white smoke came out of the apartment, the defense side conducted a simulation experiment as follows. They built a model apartment in an open space with a position similar to the master bedroom. After they set fire in the wardrobe of the master bedroom, it took 10 minutes for white smoke to come out of the window. Therefore, they deduced that the time the perpetrator set the fire must have been from 8:25, 8:35. At that time, the husband was holding the opening ceremony at the hospital and had a solid alibi. In addition, 2 milk bottles were found on the kitchen table with dried milk residue at the bottom of the bottles. The prosecutor speculated based on Choi Soo-hee's habit of feeding her child and believed that she had not given the child milk at 6 a.m. But lawyer Kim believed that Choi usually fed her child every 3 hours, but sometimes it would change depending on the circumstances, or Choi Soo-hee was not meticulous. She would only feed her child when the baby cried. Therefore, judging the time of death based on this factor is inaccurate. Prosecutor argued that the husband was very upset because he discovered his wife was having an affair and had a clear motive for murder. But lawyer Kim rebutted that this motive was far-fetched because even if he intended to kill his wife, why would he also attack his 2-year-old daughter? Moreover, he didn't even know that his wife was having an affair. After the incident occurred, the police questioned the neighbors. Some residents said they had heard the couple arguing and fighting at night in another apartment, but in apartment 708, where the incident occurred, there was no strange sound. The prosecutor claimed that the murder weapon Lee Do-hang used was a curtain control cord. The cord was 90 centimeters long, consisting of 3 thin cords, and had 5 small knots on it, and the marks on his right arm were due to his wife's struggling resistance. Lawyer Kim objected and argued that if the victim was strangled from behind, first reaction would be to grab the strangling cord, not the arm of the killer. Moreover, if the killer used a cord to murder Choi Soo-hee, there would be cord marks on her neck. But this detail was not mentioned in the autopsy report. In reality, there would be 2 routes to the scene of the apartment. One route would pass through the security room, but the security guard did not see any suspicious person entering or leaving at that time. The other way was the emergency exit, but it was locked and could not be passed through. It could be deduced that the possibility of an outsider committing the crime had been ruled out. But the defense lawyer revealed that in addition to the 2 routes above, there was actually another route. Behind the security room was an unobstructed passage for disabled people. If the perpetrator entered the apartment from that direction, he could avoid the security guard's line of sight. During the investigation of the case, he personally went along that route to enter and exit the apartment, and the security guard did not see him at all. Therefore, the defense lawyer argued that the real killer was someone else. The trial court believed that the evidence in the above case was not sufficient to prove that the defendant Lee Do-hang committed the crime. Finally, the court also declared the defendant Lee Do-hang not guilty and released him. The verdict announced in court after the sentence was pronounced caused intense interest and controversy in Korean society. Countless people were dissatisfied with the verdict of the above sentence. They believed that the real killer was Lee Do-hang, who had killed his wife and daughter with his own hands. 2 years later, on November 13, 1998, South Korean Supreme Court overturned Lee Do-hang's acquittal verdict in the case and temporarily detained him pending retrial. After a while, the case again fell into a prolonged trial process. 8 years after the incident, in February 2003, the case was tried at the South Korean Supreme Court. After a fierce debate between the prosecution and defense, the South Korean Supreme Court made its ruling. The defendant's motive for committing the crime is very difficult to determine. The assumption about the time of death of the victim made by the prosecutor lacks sufficient basis to prove the defendant guilty. Many issues are based on criminal inference. In addition, this case cannot completely rule out the guilt of a third party. Looking at the case, all the evidence is not enough to prove the defendant guilty, so all suspicions are not yet reasonable. Lee Do-hang continued to be acquitted, which meant that there may have been errors in the inspection report of the Korean forensic community, and they had lost to the foreign forensic community. This was truly an embarrassment for Korean prosecutors. After that, the South Korean government also began efforts to promote technological improvements in its forensic field. The case caused a lot of controversy in public opinion for a decade. Some people think that Lee Do-hang was a surgeon with solid medical knowledge. He rented the video twice, perhaps just to study the perfect method of committing the crime. Some others think that Lee Do-hang even used money and relationships to bribe lawyers and forensic doctors. In the end, he won the lawsuit. To answer these questions, lawyer Kim stood up to explain that Lee Do-hang and Choi Soo-hee were not rich people. They had raised 150 million won, about $111,000, by mortgaging assets and other methods to open the hospital. After the trial, Lee Do-hang's money was almost exhausted, and he really didn't have enough money to hire a lawyer. After learning about the case, lawyer Kim believed that Lee Do-hang was innocent and voluntarily became his defense lawyer. Because most domestic forensic experts were exclusively for the prosecutor, he thought about hiring foreign forensic experts. In this case, police did not find any direct evidence showing that the defendant Lee Do-hang committed the crime. From beginning to end, he was originally an introverted person. During the 8 years of prolonged trial, he developed severe social anxiety disorder. He even no longer dared to look directly into other people's eyes. Some media outlets requested to interview Lee Do-hang, but he refused and said, "I hope now the real perpetrator can be caught. When I think about the pain I had to endure in the past, I want to criticize the wrong direction of investigation and the legal system. But I don't want to continue to express my feelings in front of everyone." The above case is an unsolved case that caused controversy and became famous in South Korea and is called the Korean version of the Simpson case. Until now, people are still discussing the details of the case. Those who support and oppose Lee Do-hang being the killer are almost equal. Everyone has their own perspectives and views on the inside story. As for whether the killer is Lee Do-hang or not, perhaps only he himself knows. According to you, who is the real culprit? Please leave your opinions below. Today's video ends here, and see you in the next videos.